There's a type of person who doesn't make sense at first. They laugh at things that shouldn't be funny, stay calm in situations that make other people panic, and somehow they don't seem shaken by things that would completely throw most people off balance. At first you assume they're just relaxed, maybe emotionally strong, maybe even detached. But that assumption misses the point, because this isn't a personality type. It's an adaptation. Somewhere along the way, this person learned that life doesn't always stay predictable, that emotional safety isn't guaranteed, that things can shift quickly, quietly, without warning. And when that realization hits deeply enough, the mind changes its strategy. It starts scanning. Tone changes, delayed replies, subtle shifts in energy. Things most people ignore completely become impossible not to notice. Not because they want to overthink, but because at some point, not noticing came with consequences. And over time, that awareness becomes automatic. What looks like overthinking is often just a brain that never fully turned off its pattern recognition. But here's where people misunderstand it. This kind of awareness doesn't just create anxiety, it also creates control in chaos. Because when you've lived through enough uncertainty, your nervous system stops reacting to everything like it's an emergency. You don't stop feeling stress, but panic stops being the default response. Instead, something else develops. A strange calm, sometimes even humor, not light humor, the sharp kind. The kind that shows up in uncomfortable moments and shifts the energy just enough to make it bearable again. Because if you can turn something heavy into something absurd, even briefly, it stops owning you completely. And from there, something more subtle starts to form. They don't just hear what people say. They pick up what's underneath it, what's avoided, what's implied, what's almost said but never fully spoken. A simple, "I'm fine," doesn't land as neutral. It lands as information. Not because they're suspicious, but because they've seen too many versions of fine that weren't fine at all. Over time, this turns them into extremely accurate readers of emotional space. But there's a cost. The more you tune into others, the easier it becomes to lose track of your own internal signals. So they adapt again. They manage reactions instead of expressing them. Filter emotions before they fully surface. Stay composed even when something inside is clearly not. From the outside, it looks like stability. But internally, it often feels like containment. A quiet effort to stay in control, even when nothing feels fully settled underneath. And that effort becomes habit. They overthink messages, replay conversations, anticipate outcomes that may never happen. Not because they expect disaster, but because unpredictability once had a price. And yet, in completely different situations, they can appear calm in ways that confuse people. Sudden change, crisis, instability. While others react, they adjust. Not because it doesn't affect them, but because they've learned how to function inside uncertainty, instead of resisting it. That's the part most people misunderstand. Calm isn't always peace. Sometimes it's experience. And experience doesn't always feel soft. It shows up in relationships too. These people can be warm, attentive, deeply observant at a distance. They notice emotional shifts others miss entirely. They remember details, check in quietly, sense when something is off without needing it explained. But as closeness grows, something changes. Not suddenly, gradually. They start monitoring safety instead of just being in connection. Watching consistency. Tracking emotional risk. Not because they don't trust people, but because trust used to come with unpredictability. So vulnerability becomes controlled. They show up for others easily, but struggle to let others fully show up for them. When attention turns inward, they deflect, minimize, redirect. not because they don't want support, but because needing it once felt unsafe. So independence becomes identity. I'm fine becomes automatic, even when it isn't. And underneath all of this functioning, there's something quieter. Fatigue. The kind that doesn't come from one event, but from always being slightly on alert, always tracking, always adjusting. So they build systems, routines, anchors, familiar patterns that make the world feel more predictable again. Not because they fear life, but because unpredictability used to cost something. And even when life gets better, the body doesn't always get the memo. So part of them still braces, still observes, still prepares. But beneath that, there's something else. A quiet grief. Not always about events, but about versions of themselves. The version that didn't overthink everything. The version that trusted more easily. The version that moved through life without constantly preparing for emotional impact. It's hard to explain, because it's not a clear loss. It's a shift. And you don't always realize what changed until you notice you can't fully go back. But this isn't just a story of loss. It's also a story of transformation. Because what gets built in place of that simplicity is a deeper understanding of people, of contradiction, of emotional complexity. They learn that people can be kind and inconsistent, that life can be good and still hard, that safety and uncertainty can exist in the same space. They stop expecting life to be simple and start seeing it clearly instead. So when you meet someone like this, calm in chaos, observant in silence, emotionally precise without explanation, don't mistake it for distance. It is an absence of feeling. It's what feeling too much for too long can turn into when it has to learn how to survive.